I'm Lily Israel. I graduated from Sustainable Food and Farming in 2014, and I was on the student farm at UMass. And I am now the sales manager at Kitchen Garden Farm in Sunderland. We are a 50-acre certified organic, diverse vegetable farm. And as sales manager, I am in charge of our customer relationships, taking orders, making sure that everything that's ordered gets packed and is ready for people and is up to the quality that they expect, and finding new customers and working with our customer relationships.
My name is Sarah Visnick. Let's see. After finishing the Sustainable Food and Farming program, I took a year off, and then I went back to school actually and finished my master's in education. And so right now I'm actually teaching high school English this year, which is kind of a nice career balance with the farming. So here I am on weekends doing markets, and then I'll have the summers off to do farming. So I decided to pursue a career in teaching as well, and now I do both.
And my name's Zach Ziegler, and I graduated in 2017 in the SFF program. And I started a small farm when I was still in college, and I would commute back and forth on weekends and spend the summers working in my hometown. And then when I graduated, I kept doing that, and I always had other farm jobs, but the past 2 years ago, I think, I stopped having other jobs, and now I just run the farm full time, and it's going.
So my name is Jason DePicole. I currently live in Denver, and I'm the manager of urban food programs at the Denver Botanic Gardens. Denver Botanic Gardens is a little bit unique as far as botanic gardens go, because in addition to having their gardens, which are located downtown in the city, they also have a farm. I don't know exactly how large it is, but they have over 300 member CSA. They do, mixed vegetables, herbs, fruits, flowers. So the urban food initiatives incorporate the farm, which is called the Chatfield Farm. They also incorporate the position that I'm in, where we partner with the Denver Housing Authority to build community gardens. And then the produce that we grow at the community gardens gets distributed at a farm stand once a week to residents of the Denver Housing Authority at a sort of pay what you can model.
So hi, I'm Michelle. I graduated in 2016 from SFF. I'm now living in Boston, where I'm doing a fellowship called the Emerson National Hunger Fellowship, working on issues of hunger and poverty in the U.S., specifically how hunger and racial equity are linked. The idea of the fellowship is to bridge the gap between policy and practice, and so that we're better informed how both of those processes work, how work happens on the ground, and also, all the different types of work that happens in policy writing, coalition building, advocacy. So we get 2 placements. One is at a community-based organization. And so mine was at Project Red in Boston, Massachusetts. My project there looked at the impact of COVID on childhood food insecurity in Massachusetts. I'm now at the Alliance to End Hunger, which is a coalition out of DC, and they basically work to build the political and public will to end hunger in the U.S. through education, advocacy, and coalition building. And so it's been really awesome to learn about both sides, I feel like, from the nonprofit side and also from the policy side, because they're so intertwined.
It's a really fulfilling job, because I know that the thing that I'm trying to sell is something that I feel really passionate about and that is good for people and that people really want. So it's exciting to find new customers and make connections, and it's a social job, and it's cool to meet buyers and to have connections at all of these local restaurants and grocery stores that buy our product. Because then when I go and eat at a restaurant, like daily operation or Coco in the cellar bar or wherever that buys our stuff, I know the owners, and I just feel really connected to the whole food and farm community in this area because of the work that I do.
I mean, obviously working outside is a major plus, and that's like something I don't think I could ever work inside full time. Being your own boss is huge. That's like definitely another amazing part of running the farm. Just meeting my community and like meeting my neighbors and just like so many different people, meeting anyone connected to farming and ag and just farmers markets. You just get to build a lot of cool and nice relationships.
Is we get to do all the fun parts of like brainstorming, and we're constantly adjusting things and learning, and we're like listening to farmcasts or watching or reading about farming, and like, oh, maybe we'll try this different next year, or maybe we should try this, or maybe we should put this greenhouse here because of XYZ, or whatever decision that we make. I feel like we're constantly in that like planning, learning, changing phase. We're just always kind of trying to build it, and because it's our farm, we get to make those decisions.
I guess getting to engage with the community is the thing that I love most about my job. And there's also like a huge level of autonomy as well. That's something that I really value in any position. I love working with teams. I'm very much a team player, but at the same time, when you have a certain level of expertise in what you do, it's nice to be given the freedom to say, okay, like here are the goals, here are the objectives, like go get it done.
Right. One of my favorite parts of the fellowship was like being able to bring my food systems lens into both nonprofit and policy work was very exciting.
There are things that are just tedious, as a sales person. Some of what I'm doing, or a good amount of what I'm doing, is not actually being out in the field and in the sun and harvesting stuff, but it's sitting at a computer and typing in orders. And that can get tedious.
There's just so many different things to keep track of. It's not just the growing food and being outside and working at farmers markets. There's the whole business aspect, which is just a lot of other work that it can be challenging. Sometimes I'm like, wow, I really maybe should have thought about learning more about accounting or, how to get the right farm insurance or, workers' comp, or all the different little pieces of it that just about running any business, I imagine.
For me, it's that like, if you have a 9 to 5, you can go home and work is over. But with the farm, it's really never over. And right now we don't live on site. We used to always live right next to one of our fields. So that's kind of nice. We're able to escape a little bit. But yeah, just the constant responsibility. And while I am able to be my own boss when things go wrong, it's all on you. So there's no escaping it.
Salary, it's low. The Denver Botanic Gardens is nonprofit. I've worked at nonprofits and for-profits, and generally speaking, at nonprofits, salary is going to be low, lower compared to working in the for-profit field. Also, even in for-profit businesses, margins for food production are pretty slim. It costs a lot of money to grow food, and food is not worth very much to people. It sells pretty cheap. So it's hard to pull a decent living wage from that. So I think, figuring out exactly what I would like to be doing and how to monetize it is really important, because at the end of the day, I didn't go into sustainable food and farming for the money. I went in for the impact, and I care about people, I care about the environment, and I love food. And so I wanted to marry all of those things, but at the end of the day, got to pay the bills.
It's a hard balance, because I feel like if you do take the nonprofit route, or you do take the policy route or the academic route, that you're inevitably going to be in front of a computer a lot. And that's something I've had to learn to deal with, but something that I want to change.
So actually, my first job out of college was working at UMass at the UMass or for the UMass Permaculture Initiative. I worked as a student for the UMass Permaculture Initiative. I was a student garden coordinator my junior and senior year of college. And then when I graduated, the timing just happened to be that the current full-time garden manager was moving out of town. And so I took over that job when I graduated. That was so lucky. So many people, most people don't go out of college like knowing that they have job security. But I knew my whole senior year that I was planning to take over that job. And after 2 years at UMass, I decided that I didn't want to work so small scale anymore. And I wanted to have an experience of growing more food, really growing food and like feeding people, not just the small sort of demonstration sites that we have at the UMass Permaculture Gardens. So I came here and I worked on the harvest crew for a year. And after that, I was the washroom manager at Kitchen Garden for a year. And that was a really challenging job. It's just managing a washroom is really stressful, really, really long hours, really intense. And I think before that year, I wouldn't have realized really that I could combine my passion for economics and for farming. I didn't really think about a sales job in farming, but after that year working in the washroom, I was interacting with customers a lot just because customers come to the washroom to pick up their orders. And I really enjoyed that piece of interacting with customers. And so I ended up starting to do sales stuff at Kitchen Garden. It hadn't been a role before that. Before I took it on, the owner had just been doing sales. And so it was really cool to get to take on this new role and sort of build it. And now I've had that role for 3 years, and it's really been a learning experience, and it really makes me feel like what I want to do long term is sell produce.
I think for me, with the ag ed focus, I guess I'm still trying to figure this out a little bit, but I guess I always thought that I would do agriculture and education in one thing, like a farm-based ed program. And I worked at the Hartsbrook Waldorf School when I was in college, and that was an incredible experience doing kind of the farming and the teaching all at the same time. And now what I am doing is like separating the teaching and the farming. So I have the actual teaching job and then the farming separately. So I feel like that's where I've kind of shifted a little bit.
I kind of always knew I wanted to run my own farm, and I definitely didn't think I'd be running like a CSA program or anything like that, but it really just started pretty small scale as selling at farmers markets, which we still do, but I think we've been able to build such like a following of customers that we have a much stronger support base for the farm.
You know, going into UMass, my thinking was I want to learn about agriculture for the purpose of starting my own farm. That was the goal. And so I took a lot of, I did the student farm enterprise, which is incredible. I ran the Food for All garden, which I don't think is in operation anymore, sadly. But, I was pretty much like very focused on production. And when I got out, that's what I was doing as a farm manager. I realized that I was really interested in feeding people who didn't have access to good quality food, nutritious food. And my experience farming was very much, while it was engaging, it was enriching. The majority of the food that I was growing was going to people who were not hungry. The food that I was growing, I was doing good things for the environment. It was high quality food, but it was going to people who had all the access in the world. And at the same time, I knew that there were so many people who were struggling with finding good food, being able to afford good food. And so I wanted to transition into a career where I could really focus on providing really high quality food to people who can't necessarily shop at Whole Foods, for instance, or who can't go to the farmer's market. And so after working at Queen's Farm, I did a little thinking, and I was like, how can I make this happen? And so I actually took 1 year and started my own business because it's something that I had always wanted to do. I was growing microgreens. It's very kind of like niche, like product, but it takes 2 weeks to grow, like micro kale, for instance, and you can sell it for $40 a pound. But again, I was just selling food to, white tablecloth restaurants, and it wasn't fulfilling in that way because I knew that there was still so much of a need out there. So after that, I did a little research. I'm like, okay, again, how can I use my experience and my education to, create a more just and equitable food system, provide food for people? And that's when I actually found a job working in Harlem, in New York City, as the agriculture director at a nonprofit called Harlem Grown. And so this nonprofit, they built community farms and school gardens throughout Harlem, and they provided education and mentorship to youth in Harlem through hands-on education in urban agriculture and mentors and educators in schools, in public schools, with elementary aged young people. So that was really fulfilling. I was working there from 2019 to 2020, and then COVID hit, and everybody had to pivot. There was basically a huge restructuring of the organization. So sadly, I had to move on. But from there, a lot of things had changed in my life too. And, I was like, okay, this is a great experience. How can I kind of build on this? And then I found the job in Denver at the Botanic Gardens, managing their urban food programs. And I'm like, this is perfect. And it's in the place I really, really love and really want to be long-term. So it worked out really well.
So after graduating the Sustainable Food and Farming program, I woofed for about a year. And I also worked as a nanny. So I think it kind of goes to show that you might not always find your path right away. And so I woofed in Vermont, and I went to Oregon and California and also Washington, and I worked on like a variety of farms. I decided after doing that I really wanted to pursue grad school. I found that while I loved production agriculture, that I would always be like, asking questions in the field and talking with my farm crew members. And I became like driven by, issues of equity within the sustainable food system. And so I was also always interested in the global food system. And so I decided to go to grad school where I studied international studies, and I had a focus on South Asia and also on food studies. Cool. I got a really great opportunity to work with Dr. Vandana Shiva, who was like my personal hero in undergrad. It was like I got the email and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to do this. And so in summer of 2018, I went to India, just packed my bags. I'd never been there. And I went to work in her office as a research assistant. And so when I was working with her, I gained a lot of perspective like into the food sovereignty movement, which was what my research was on. It was really interesting working with someone that was such a kind of, figure in the movement. So I learned kind of like, I think, the good side and the bad side of that, and really got interested in that subject of food sovereignty. And from there, I knew that's what I wanted to do research on. And so I went back to India on this fellowship called the Boren Fellowship. They give grants for students to study languages that are critical to U.S. national security, but are not really well studied in the U.S., and there's not many university courses that offer them. And so I studied Hindi in Rajasthan, which is like in the northwest part of India, in the desert. And I also got some funding to do my research project. So that was really awesome for me. And I feel I got to interview farmers who definitely like changed my perspective. So my thesis looked at like the intersection of climate change, food sovereignty, and agroecology. So I looked at how local movements and NGOs were coming together and using organic farming, sustainable farming. I mean, there's like a big umbrella of agroecology, but I wanted to understand how they were using that as both a vehicle to promote sustainability in their communities, but also community empowerment. And so it was really awesome to talk to farmers and really hear about their experience in trying to transition to organic farming after having done chemical farming for generations. And I never envisioned kind of the graduate school PhD path. And it was something I feel like I fell into and just, I mean, it was hard. I'm not going to like, I want to say just walk through open doors, but I definitely like worked really hard. But it felt right. And it felt like the way that I can best align, my interests and my strengths to make change in the world is through a more academic and like teaching career.